Hello. Shall we start? What do you think?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. First slide. Let me introduce myself for people that haven't met me before or that don't know anything about me. My name is Adrian Pike. I'm originally from the United Kingdom. I studied biochemistry and physiology and with a minor in medical sciences. I did cancer research at the medical school, the Welsh National School of Medicine. I'm proud to say I'm Welsh. And I was studied there for several years. Before coming to the United States, I was offered a position at the medical school here as a fellow, looking at steroid inborn errors in children of metabolism and fetal growth and nutrition. So we looked at a few aspects, mostly with a steroid slant, because that's what one of my specialties. Also, I did some breast cancer work with another group. So there was a couple of three-pronged approaches there. And since then, I've retired. So and I joined the CAG. I'm very new. Last year, I think, and now I'm a member. And this is my first meeting to chair. So hopefully it'll go well. And I think if we can hold the questions until the end of this presentation, I'm going to give a short presentation on arsenic and health, and arsenic specifically tied to the Vasquez Boulevard viaduct. So can we get the first slide? Have I got control of this, Bridget, or no?
So you just tell me when you want to change slides.
Okay, the next slide, the first slide of the presentation. That's Ian. As you know, you probably all know Ian. He's part of our group. Ian Tafoya is a CAG member. Our Earth Justice Warrior, we call him. Environmental Justice Warrior.
Is he a CAG member? He hasn't been for a while.
He is on our advisory board.
Oh, okay.
Also, me and Ian have been working on, we've been working on sort of connecting with other CAGs in the state of Colorado. So I actually had a conversation with him about this yesterday. So that he is, even though he's not here right now, he's around for sure, doing all the things. I think right now he's working on a couple of initiatives, Waste No More and a couple other ones, but anyway, he's around for sure.
And I thought I read that there was an email sent to him asking to make sure he was still interested. I think Bridget sent it saying you haven't been in a while, and we're just.
Oh no, that was to Brad Evans and Drew Dutcher. And Drew just called me tonight. So why don't we go ahead with the agenda, and I will give you a report at the end about that.
And as they say in Wales, no star, no star.
Not yet. That comes at the end of the night. No star is good night.
Right.
Excellent. Shall I read the agenda? Yeah. Okay, so the start is the presentation is going to be the arsenic in Vasquez Boulevard and the health impacts of arsenic, presented by myself. And then at 6:20 we will have the EPA community involvement plan, and that will be presented by Joan. And then 6:40 we will have Chuck Norris, our hydrologist, will do the presentation on the Stantec report and the CAG newsletter. And then 7 o'clock will be the CAG committee reports and code of conduct. And then 7:15 will be agency reports. That'll be Region 8, CDPAT, and Denver if they're here. And then 7:25 will be agenda suggestions for May 18th CAG meeting. And then 7:30 we will adjourn if we keep in time.
I think somebody needs to mute. If we could have everybody mute while the presentations are going on. Thank you. It sounds like someone has their phone in their pocket.
You can mute everybody and then unmute whoever's speaking, whoever you desire to speak.
I think we're good. The hiss has gone away. Okay. So it's going to be, the interest is going to be the effect of arsenic on your health, and specifically from the I-70 Vasquez Boulevard. And so the first slide is from arsenic pollution in soil. So next slide, please. So arsenic has been used for a number of years. It's interesting that it was in Victoria, England, and I think it was at the beginning of the 19th century in the United States. It was used as a complexion cream to lighten ladies' skin. It was also in soap and in wafers that you could eat. The idea being that back then, the paler the skin, the better, or the more attractive that person was. And I believe that what arsenic was doing was actually breaking down the red blood cells in the skin. So you didn't have any, what made you look pink was the blood flowing through your skin. So it had very little blood flow actually on your skin. So you look really pale, and it actually is quite dangerous. Next slide, please. So there are two main types of arsenic. Arsenic that occurs naturally is an element, and it can also combine with other organic compounds to form organic arsenic. The inorganic arsenic is found in soils, in sediments, and groundwater. These compounds occur either naturally or as a result of mining or smelting, or when using arsenic for industrial purposes. And then arsenic that is combined in organic form is mainly from fish and shellfish. Next slide, please. So the sources of arsenic in the environment, excuse me, from groundwater and from soil and from air pollution. In industry, it will be from smelters, from the power plants, from treated wood. It's used as a preservative in treated wood, in pottery and in glass, obviously in pesticides, rat killer, insecticides, and herbicides, anything that you spray in the garden at one time. In medicine, arsenic trioxide, not used as much anymore, but that was the form that it was used. And then you can get arsenic from obviously the seafood, from the fish and shellfish. In seaweed and in whales, we used to.
Excuse me, could everybody please mute? We cannot hear.
Go bitch, do it yourself, please.
How do I do it?
Are you hosting the meeting? Who's hosting the meeting?
I am.
Then Adrian, you need to mute everybody except yourself.
Okay.
Thank you, Bridget. That's better, yeah?
Did it go?
Go, Adrian.
Are we back?
Yes.
Okay. Seaweed is a source of arsenic in seaweed. So in Wales, I can still hear it. Somebody's got their mic on and I can't. Let me see.
Rachel, do you know how to mute everybody?
Make me a co-host.
How do I do that?
Go to my name and you can hover on the three dots and it should be made co-host.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the share. And I go on 3 dots, make co-host. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. I got it.
Can you do it?
Okay.
Let's see, what do we need? Okay,
Okay.
Okay, are we good? Can you hear me still now?
mhm,
Okay, so in the seaweed that we used to eat, what I used to eat in Wales was called lava bread. It actually was seaweed, but it is a source of arsenic as well, but it's also a very good source of iodine. And then rice has a high content of arsenic, which depending on where it's grown, there will be more arsenic in some rice products than in others. And if you want to decontaminate it, you can soak it in water, and it will remove about 75% of the arsenic. But other rices are better than others, so you can probably, I don't know if the labels will actually put arsenic contents of the rice. But next slide, please. So did arsenic in global come from the weed killer or used by the residents, or did it come from the Arsenic plant? So in 1998, Arsenic claimed that arsenic in global came from weed killer that was applied by residents to kill crabgrass. EPA Region 8 still seems to cling to that disproven myth. It actually has been disproven. I did some research for this talk, and initially I did see that it was claimed that it was from the crabgrass killer, but in actually fact, it was from the Arsenic plant. They actually did manufacture arsenic trioxide and made rat killer. So it was finally found to be from the Arsenic plant. And in reality, Professor John Dexter, an associate professor of geology at the University of Colorado Boulder, used a special equipment to fingerprint the exact type of arsenic found in the soil, allowing scientists to rule out the certain sources. So you can actually do that. I've done that myself when I was working for a different reason. It was for amino acids. I was trying to locate the source of amino acids from different food sources as opposed to the ones that were manufactured. So you can look at the different types of arsenic and you can tell where they're from. And according to Dr. Wiener, the ensuing study found that the arsenic in global soil was not from a herbicide, as Arsenic would claim, but from a unique trioxide used in making rat poison and manufactured at the smelter from 1911 to 1927. So it's easy, it's easy to do if you've got the right equipment. That's the bottom line. So yes, you can distinguish the source of the arsenic and where, if it was manufactured or if it came from a herbicide, because the processes are different and they will give a different fingerprint as they describe it here. Next slide, please. And this is a slide, this is a small short video showing the effect of arsenic as an endocrine disruptor.
If you've been listening to the news at all, you've probably heard about the dangerous chemicals that are called endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. Inside our bodies is a network of glands and organs called the endocrine system that produce, store, and secrete hormones. Normally, the hormones go from the gland or organ to the other organs and fit right into specific receptors expressed in cells. Kind of like how a key goes into a lock. But when EDCs get into the body, they can mimic the shape of the hormone, and they go into the receptor instead. They can trick the body into thinking they are a hormone or block the hormone from fitting into its receptor. Fooling a cell in this way can trigger abnormal processes in the body. This can wreak havoc on the entire endocrine system and may lead to severe health consequences. EDCs have been linked to human health issues related to sperm quality, fertility, abnormalities in sex organs, endometriosis, early puberty, nervous system function, immune function, cancers, breathing problems, metabolic issues, obesity, heart health, growth, neurological and learning disabilities, and more, because hormones regulate nearly every process in the body. What's worrisome is that exposure to EDCs can happen anywhere and come from the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water we drink, and through the skin. Some EDCs even transfer from mothers to fetuses and infants. They can be found in industrial chemicals that leach into soil and groundwater and then make their way into the food chain and build up in fish, animals, and people. Consumer products such as plastics, household chemicals, fabrics treated with flame retardants, cosmetics, lotions, products with fragrance, and antibacterial soaps, pesticides, fungicides, or industrial chemicals in the workplace. The best way to avoid exposure is to check labels and avoid products containing known EDCs. Research on EDCs is growing, so watch for new information on products to help your family's health. Contact your elected officials and tell them to pass the Personal Care Products Safety Act, which would create an FDA review process to check the safety of ingredients used in personal care products like toothpaste, soap, and sunscreen. Patients have questions. We have answers. The Hormone Health Network is your trusted source for endocrine patient education. Our free online resources are available at hormone.org.
Next slide, please. So what are the symptoms of arsenic poisoning? So the acute arsenic poisoning can cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, cough, headache, weakness, loss of appetite, and shaking, because it does affect your nervous system quite profoundly. So these are the short term. So if you stop taking the arsenic, you can actually, you can recover and it will be excreted from the body, and hopefully it doesn't cause any long-term damage. Next slide, please. So the long-term effects of arsenic poisoning, as I mentioned, there will be an impaired cognitive development and reduction of brain weight and a deficit of intelligence and memory. The lung cancer there will be lung cancer, or can cause lung cancer and pulmonary disease. The endocrine system will be affected, and I think diabetes mellitus is one of them, but I think it's quite profound in the long term, since it does have a competitive effect on the hormones that are regulating the endocrine system. The liver disease, primarily liver cancer, can be caused by long-term exposure to arsenic, and from the reproductive system, cervical cancer and prostate cancer. From the skin, you can get pigmentation changes and hyperkeratosis, which is quite severe. In cardiovascular disease, you can get heart disease and hypertension, and then in the renal system, you can get kidney cancer, nephrotoxicity, and phosphaturia, which is a high excretion of phosphate in your urine from the combination of arsenic and calcium being displaced. So you can wind up with brittle bone disease. And then with the bladder and urinary tract, you can get bladder cancer and upper urinary tract carcinoma. So it has quite a profound effect in the long term over most of the systems in the body. So next slide, please. The ATSDR guideline for chronic exposure to soil arsenic for a child is 15 parts per million, which is, from what I can remember, is 15 milligrams per liter. The action levels to clean up OU1 on Vasquez Boulevard I-70 Superfund is 70 parts per million, which is much higher than the ATSDR recommendations. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is grappling with a revised estimate of arsenic carcinogenicity that, if enacted, would result in unattainable cleanup standards, according to Susan Griffiths, a senior toxicologist with EPA Region 8 in Denver, Colorado. Next slide, please. This is a short video showing the effect of heavy metals in the soil from growing vegetables and eating the vegetables that are from soil that has been contaminated with arsenic and heavy metals.
High levels of arsenic and lead from the former Sarco smelter in Tacoma have been found in soil in areas in King, Pierce, and Thurston counties. Although the smelter is gone, the arsenic and lead remain. If you live in these counties, you may have polluted soil in your yard. There's no immediate health risk, but long-term daily exposure by accidentally swallowing or breathing in soil can be harmful to our health, especially in young children.
Gardening is dirty business. Here are a few things you should do to keep dirt outside and keep you and your family healthy. Wear gloves and a dust mask. Avoid digging in windy conditions and keep the soil wet when working in it.
Food gardening is wonderful. Just use raised beds or containers. Gardening is a great way to get fresh foods that are healthy, taste better, and save us money. We love our garden.
Yeah.
So we converted it to raised beds after we learned we had unsafe levels of arsenic and lead in our yard. Raised beds with new topsoil are a safe, healthy way to garden.
First, we laid down landscape fabric to cover the original soil. Then we constructed our beds on top of it.
We used wood for the boxes, but you can also use stone, concrete, or other masonry products. But stay away from painted boards, treated lumber, or railroad ties.
Right, because they can contain arsenic, lead, or other things you don't want in your garden.
You want to get clean topsoil. The more the better. At least 12 inches is ideal. It's very important to make sure the soil you're adding is clean and safe to use, since some soil can contain harmful elements.
Be an informed consumer and ask your soil supplier these questions. Has the soil been tested for metals, petroleum, arsenic, and lead? Is it certified by the U.S. Composting Council? If so, it should have the Seal of Testing Assurance, or STA, which means the compost has been tested for metals and salmonella.
The idea is to raise your produce in soil you know is safe and keep the original soil and the new soil separated with a barrier.
When you're done working in the soil, be sure to wash off dirt from your hands, your tools, and clothing. And if you did get dirt under the fingernails, don't forget to scrub with a brush. And when it's time for harvest, always wash your vegetables well before eating.
If you do not have room for a raised bed, containers are the next best thing. There are various types and sizes of containers. Some are even free.
And if you're remodeling or doing a landscape project that requires removing soil from your property, you need to be careful getting rid of your soil if it's contaminated. Contact the Department of Ecology. They can provide information on proper disposal.
Following these simple actions can help keep you and your family healthy.
For more information, please visit dirtalert.info.
Hey everyone!
Okay, are there any questions? Thank you. You can turn your mics on now because I can't hear anybody.
Did they ever determine how much arsenic there was in the soil and from the tailings that were given to the yards in Gloveville and Elyria?
Up here at Asarco?
Yeah.
From yes, and that is part of another presentation.
Okay.
There is a truckload actually still in the ground here, and it has been measured in different dimensions. They've measured it in distances from where the Arsenic plant was. They measured it in combination with cadmium. They've measured it in combination with the herbicide. They've measured it in many different ways, and there's still a lot that is in the ground.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't have the slides available with me right now, but I did make slides of that.
Adrian, what are you talking about as far as Sarco Globe? Because 99% of the Sarco Globe's residential areas were all remediated up to a foot, except for a handful of properties. And I'm curious as to where you're getting that information from.
These are published. This is published data. I think the dates that I remember go back to 2014. From what I can remember, I off the top of my head, I don't remember all the dates. There is a lot of data that has been developed from publications that have been developed showing the distribution of arsenic throughout Globeville, throughout Globeville, from in distances from the Asarco plant. And they've done it in it's interesting ways how they've done it. They've done it as an absolute value. So they've measured the concentrations and shown that as you move out from the plant, it does actually diminish in concentration. And then they've actually measured it in relation to other metals and shown that there's a pattern. So I don't have those slides, like I said, but I'm planning on doing a second presentation or a third presentation where those slides will be included. And they are, and it is, from what I can remember, it is in some of the residential gardens that I looked at, but I don't have the dates when they were done. But there was a few blocks close to the Saco plant, well, not a few, but several blocks that had high levels of arsenic.
Yeah, I'd like to see the data when that data was taken, just because I worked on that site since '93, and I know that every single yard, except for a handful of people who refused access, has all been taken away. So I suspect that's old data, not current data.
I'd have to take a look at when it was done. There is, like I said, there's a lot of, they say a lot. For a community this size, I was kind of surprised to see the amount of analysis that's been done over the years, but it stopped. It's, the question that I had, and this is going back years ago, was when they did the removal of the soil and they replaced it, did they reanalyze the soil that was put back on top? Has it ever been reanalyzed?
Yeah, they had to do that as part of the deal. They basically would take composite samples. They first started at 500 cubic yards, and they kept on going up because this is virgin soil that was actually made for the site and stuff. So they would take it from A layer horizon and sample it at 2,000 square foot, 2,000 cubic foot batches as they would go. They were checking also for nutrient values and stuff like that. So there's quite a bit of data on that. But either way, I was just curious as to what you're referencing, when that data was taken, because it'd be very interesting to me to see if that was recent data.
I think, from what I remember, the last analysis was 2014. That's the date that sticks in my mind, and I would have to take a look at it and see when it was done the last time. But they did some bore samples as well to show the depth of the arsenic contamination. So I don't know. See, these are the things that I would have asked for, after it was all supposedly cleaned up, is, were the bore samples done to show the depth of the arsenic and how clean, because it's as far as I can tell, it's, they did quite a job of cleaning it up, but it's still there. There's still quite extensive contamination. So
you're saying Asarco Globeville. That's not the I-70 site.
No, either way, Adrian, if you have that electronic format, and if you could send that to me, I'd be very interested to read it and see it, see details. Thank you. I
will. But the interesting thing that came out of this too was that they were talking about the air pollution, because that video that was showed, for me it was quite sad, because when I was growing up, I came from Wales. We have mountains. If anybody doesn't know, Wales is very mountainous, not like here, but it is quite mountainous. And one thing I enjoyed was that we could go out anywhere, anytime, The air was clean, the soil was clean, and today, you know, to see what's going on here with the children, that they can't go outside the door. You know, the air is polluted, the soil is polluted, and it's sad. It's sad from my perspective that I took it for granted that we could go anywhere, anytime, and it was never a problem. And now this video, the last video we showed was people having to, you know, plant in boxes and in planters and, you know, wear gloves and all that messing around, which we never thought about, never considered it. When we had, I don't know what you call them here, you call them allotments, where you have a big garden, you know, where you can plant tomatoes and anything like that. I mean, our city would supply spare land, and you could, you know, you could grow, you know, runner beans, kidney beans, tomatoes, and potatoes, anything you wanted to. I mean, it's quite a large size. I don't know if you can do that here without risk, because the other part I read was that leafy vegetables selectively take up arsenic. So if you're growing kale or, you know, some of the root vegetables will concentrate the arsenic in the skin. So, you know, these things that we take for granted from, say, from where I came from, and maybe from other parts of Denver or other parts of Colorado, you can't do that here. You can't do that in Globeville area, Swansea. It's quite risky. Let's put it like that.
Adrian, may I make a statement, comment?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, thanks. And this is directed to CDPHE, Fonda, as a beginning, and just the research I've done, that as you said, Fonda, the Colorado Department of Health was given the responsibility for the ASARCO globe. And the reason I bring that up was a standard was set at 70 ppm at that time with CDPHE, and CDPHE in some documentation says that EPA standard for a Superfund cleanup for arsenic was 40, based on children's uptake. And then recently, as the research shows, it was 47 for children, 47 ppm. And so ASARCO decided 70 ppm with CDPHE. And then the data is saying that the Vasquez Boulevard OU1, they decided with arsenic, and I guess for the entire site, OU1, 2, and 3, that the standard would be set the same as their neighbors, it says, 70 ppm. And so at this point, that is not a health-based standard. But what I wanted to say was, why does Colorado Department of Health have a different standard for cleanup at this time?
Part of the reason why is that is when they did back in 1993, they used the best technology and best information they had. Since that time, and even for VBI-70, they actually did a fetal pig study where they actually fed fetal pig, or basically small pigs, little arsenic pellets to determine the uptake. And based upon that, they had a real amount of uptake. They would be able to use the IBUK modeling, determine what it was. And actually, based upon that modeling, EPA had determined that it was supposed to be 250 parts per million was actually a reasonable level for based upon the modeling. But because of what was going on in 250 parts per million, yes.
That's huge amount.
I understand.
Fonda, that was, wait a minute, Fonda, that was not, that was Region 8's determination.
Right.
With their study. The Supreme Court in Montana shot that down. Remember, you know that.
Well,
Region
either
8
way,
went into
I'm just talking
Montana.
about how they did that. Montana, either way, I'm explaining how they came about that, and they used the 70. Now, we have another site. You understand, as Adrian understands too, arsenic comes in different forms, depending what the form is, different uptakes. And so based upon the science we had at that time, 70 was considered to be a reasonable number. Now, also for VBI-70, for SARCO, they actually had what's called a buffer number of 28. So in reality, they actually cleaned up to 28 because people had the option, if they were above 28, to have their property cleaned under, and it gets complicated, but they actually cleaned almost all the properties to 28 parts per million or above, not just 70. So that's the SARCO, but that was based upon a class action lawsuit that happened and everything else, which is a little bit different than just what was going on in VBI 70.
Well, what I was saying was that in 1993, the data indicates that CDPHE was aware of EPA's Superfund standard, while the ASARCO Globe was not considered a national Superfund site. CDPHE did not follow EPA's 40 ppm for arsenic at that time for children. And then, as I said, now it's 47 ppm. So there's a lot of discussion. Places around the country have different standards. So
Right.
Region 8 definitely was not in line with the rest of the country.
However, we still use 28 as a cleanup number. It was just,
That was background. That was called background.
No, it was called a buffer number, Joan. That's what
It
they
was
had.
what?
And the consent decree, and I give you a copy of it. It talks about having a buffer number of 28. And all people had to do is say yes, because the class action lawsuit made it complicated, but they were allowed, they basically, if you're above 28, you could have your property cleaned up under the Superfund site.
Well, that didn't happen in, that didn't happen in the Vasquez Boulevard, though.
No, that wasn't, it was part of the class action lawsuit and everything else. There was a plaintiff in VBI 70. There was no viable, because at the time, you got to remember, SARCO had claimed bankruptcy back in 2000. And they claimed it again in 2005, then again later. So there was no viable PRP, even though they paid $1 million, that's what happened. So either way, the cleanup number of 70 was the official number, 28 was what they were able to get people cleaned up to because the class action lawsuit, it gets a little complicated, but they did use 28 really to be the cleanup number for VBI 70. And still, it was based upon the science that CDPHE had determined back at that time. The numbers now we have for another site, I believe is 60 for the other site in Pueblo. So
61, yes.
The numbers are all over the place. And
exactly. The 28 was never considered for the VBI 70.
No.
It was set at 70. And that I just want to emphasize again, it's very different around the country. So thanks, Fonda, for that update.
Okay,
no problem.
Thank you. Are there more questions on this particular part of the presentation tonight? Anybody have questions about arsenic and health specifically?
Adrian, what sort of, and whoever wants to chime in, what sort of guidance would you give folks that want to start a garden?
Well, if you're in the GES neighborhood, I think you'd have to be a little careful. You know, that video is going to be very helpful. I think, you know, if you've got a planter boxes, anything like that, where you fill it with soil from any of the stores over there would be fine. But I don't know where you are, but I would be careful. And it's gonna be, arsenic is it's prevalent in in all the soil, so it doesn't matter. It's just that we happen to have a higher level here out in GES. So, but it's in a lot of foods. It's a naturally occurring. I love seafood. I love crab. So I got to be a little bit more careful next time. But yeah, and rice. You can rinse the rice, and you can get some of the arsenic off that way. You'll get 75% off. So there are ways of decontaminating, and you can filter your water as well. So there are ways of dealing with it. But as far as growing your own food, leafy vegetables tend to accumulate large amounts of arsenic if you have contaminated soil. Anybody else? No.
No, I do. So what about those families, those households that don't have this information? I know a lot of my neighbors have gardens.
Yeah.
And there's no way that they know these things. So that's one. The other thing is what are the statistics for people in GES for asthma, cancer, et cetera, whatever it is that we can become ill with arsenic? Does anybody have that statistical information?
I've been trying to get.
Thank you.
I've been trying to get that information for a long time. The epidemiology of GES and pathological conditions is something I've been driving at forgetting for I would say for the last couple of years, because obviously we have a high incidence of pathological condition, abnormally high level, high incidences of pathological conditions in GES. And it's difficult to find out that information and to correlate it with the toxicity or the pollution that exists in GES. So that would be the link that I would be interested in seeing.
Adrian, is there any chance that there is a cumulative impact that can ever be researched regarding, in addition to arsenic, we have lead, you have heavy metals. I mean, ore was brought in and mill tailings after the ore was produced, the scag, et cetera. There are other elements, and we know that VBI 70, I don't know why I said VBI 70, Vasquez Boulevard, they had a cadmium, but they stopped measuring cadmium. I always wanted to ask Fondo what his thoughts were, and maybe EPA, why did we stop in trying to measure cadmium in the OU1?
My understanding is, well, this is what happened over in in Globeville. Cadmium is a much larger element, and it drops out much faster. So based upon the sampling that we had in the Sarco Globe, once we reached Argo Park, which is about 4 blocks away, cadmium dropped amazingly. It went from high levels to almost background almost immediately, and it's because cadmium itself doesn't move, is a much larger particle than arsenic and lead is. And so it drops out from the smokestacks at a much faster rate. And so based upon the sampling that we had, it almost went from, from the action levels to almost nothing past Argo Park. And that's why they didn't sample more.
And two, just to follow up on Gene's question, is that even if you measure the levels in blood of arsenic and cadmium, the thing with arsenic is it's cleared from the body very quickly, and so all you'll actually get to see is the damage it's done. So the pathological effects that it does to the body, but you won't actually find, like being a detective, you won't actually find the culprit because it's rapidly excreted. All you'll find is, if you've got brittle bones because it really has a profound effect on the endocrine system. It does actually act as a hormone. So when you see that, but you may not actually find the arsenic levels to be high because it is actually passed in the urine very rapidly after ingestion.
Yeah, there's 2 things. There was 2 questions. One from Angela, and the other one about the site. So the one from Angela, the risk assessment was done, and the cleanup level was higher than 70. The public comment received at the time made EPA and the CDPHE go for a lower number, so 70. So all the samples that we did, we sampled more than 4,500 residences out there. So the majority of them did not have concentrations above their cleanup value, so they're safe. That's the thing. The ones that are out there that don't have information or that we deny the cleanup, that's what we have institutional controls. Then the second question was about cadmium. During the investigation, we sampled for a myriad number of things, not just lead and arsenic. We sampled for more things. And that investigation keeps the contaminants that need cleanup and the ones that don't need cleanup because they are below standards, because they're background for various reasons, they are just dropped out. And that's the process that was done at VBI 70. So that's how cadmium is not part of the cleanup.
Jesse, just real quick question. If you could provide any kind of a report that shows that the Asarco Globe and VBI 70 Vasquez Boulevard, that the 70 ppm was done and assessed with the baseline risk assessment. There was one in 2001, one there's 2009, 8, and 9, that in fact, Region 8 was entirely different than the rest of the country. That's how they came up with 240 ppm for arsenic. So when we dropped to 70, all the data says that Vasquez Boulevard decided to set the standard because they were worried about the 240 at the same level that Asarco Globe set the standard. That 70 is not a health risk standard. If there's anything you can provide that would help the community understand that EPA set that base standard with Vasquez Boulevard Superfund site as a health-based standard, that would be helpful.
Okay, can we?
You already said it. The baseline health risk assessment talks about that.
I'm sorry, we have to.
No, it doesn't.
I'm sorry, we have to move on to the next presentation, which I believe is the EPA Community Involvement Plan, report, questions, discussion, and the preparation of the CAG comments to EPA on the CIP. And
Rachel.
Be given by Joan, I believe. Is that right?
Actually, that's for Rachel.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Rachel? Okay. I thought
We're
it was
tag
Joan.
teaming it. Yes,
Okay.
we're tag teaming it.
Okay.
There are several questions, and I definitely want Joan to chime in on here, and you can kind of see the rundown that we have here as well. First and foremost, the community involvement plan, I have been researching community like SIPs all over the country. And the SIP that we have seems really incomplete. The draft that you provided last week. And so, and in multiple ways, like it would literally take us days to go through all the ways that it feels really incomplete. Mostly, there's a couple of items that just sort of really pop out. It's just the lack of how you're going to communicate with us, the community, and how are our words and our input considered and taken into consideration in your operations. And ultimately, I just feel like we need to kind of reframe this conversation in so many ways, but mostly this document literally should be something that talks about how we're going to work together and how we are, equal partners in what's happening in our community. And so I don't get that sense from you all that that is the intention on your end. And I also, just as I'm kind of going through the SIP and as I'm kind of looking at the different stages that we've had over the years, and there was another SIP and it was updated and all these other things. And I don't get the sense that you've heard the community and have actually integrated what they said into the SIP itself. Also, there's, and we can kind of go through some of these particular items, but there's one page that talks about, that disaggregates the data, and it talks about the demographics of this community. And admittedly, in the document, it says that this is a highly concentrated minority community. And in that vein, I'm wondering, I don't see anywhere in there about an environmental justice screen. And why, and as you know, that would mean that there would be more attention given to this area, more consideration, possibly more funding. So the environmental justice screen wasn't done. And so I'm wondering why that wasn't done and what steps are going to be taken to possibly do that. also, I'm really trying to see where you all have come to what I admittedly have been in this for about 3 years now, like in this CAG and working in this CAG. So I may not have a lot of the historical archival kinds of information, and I hope folks will fill that in. But there are lots of resources that are available to our CAG, like a technical advisor that gets paid for, a facilitator. There's all these resources. And I don't recall ever being coached or talked to about how to get those resources that could really possibly help out. Because the essential thing here is that we know that there are tons of experts, and there are like this stuff takes a level of expertise that maybe community members don't have, so they might need help to decipher what's going on in their community. And in the scientific sense, I mean, they know what's going on inside of their bodies, so they're experts. But to understand the science and what that actually can do and how that can actually affect the body. So with that said, we can kind of go through some of the items in particular. I'm just trying, like, there's just, so tell me what would be and maybe you all can help suggest and figure out a way to have this conversation, because I don't want people to get cut off, and I don't want people to get interrupted, and I don't want people to feel silenced. And so how can we create, what's the best kind of flow that can help us to create a way to talk about the SIP with you all? Jesse, Fonda, Chris.
Can I address one thing real quick, Rachel?
Sure.
We talked about the tag. I had spoken to the CAG person, who was the lady with the reddish hair, who was the organizer back then. Bridget, who was the person back 3 years ago? I'm not sure if you're, anyway.
Maybe Kim?
Kim,
Morse?
there we go. Yeah, Kim Morse.
She had black hair, though. She had curls.
No, that's the only person I could think of.
Sorry, but anyway, and I told her, I said, hey, there are funds and resources. You guys have the, what was the group that you guys working with? Who was the attorney that was working with you guys, not Earth Justice person, the other person with the.
Lloyd, maybe?
Sorry?
Lloyd?
Yeah, Lloyd. And he's got, they're a 5013C, so they could apply to get a CAG for you guys, or get a tag for you guys. And at the time, I said, listen, that's what you need to do. That way you can get the funding and everything else. You got to have a 5013C. And for whatever reason, you guys decided not to pursue that. And I said, well, that was the option we had back then. I don't know anything's different since that time. However, the CAG decided not to do that option.
So I think that was a time when perhaps Elizabeth Suarez was a facilitator, and we got in a FOIA request, we got documentation that did not lead us to really have a trusting feeling about the CAG, about the options that you could offer us. For example, a facilitator, it seemed that she was collaborating behind our back with the agencies. And then subsequently there was another facilitator who, from the EPA, from the FOIA requests we got, it seemed that his intent was not really to facilitate goodwill and cooperation. So I think that there was a lack of trust, and that really has not been addressed. Fonda, you've been a faithful attendee and with us through thick and thin, and we're really grateful. But I think there's more work that needs to be done on establishing a trusting relationship.
Right. Well, you guys can still apply for a tag. As long as you guys get a 5013C to sponsor you, you guys can still do that. That way you can get all the things you need.
The question about the tag has been asked many times by the CAG, and we always provide you the information on how to do it. and we've brought in the people that can talk to you through the process. And every time you ask, we give you information, you never take it. That wasn't just during Elizabeth, that's been multiple times through the history. The facilitator, the last one we brought in, you guys didn't want our facilitator. Said, don't bring him in, you want to have the one that you had. And you started with Lamone at that time. That's why we don't have a facilitator anymore. So
I can tell you,
we've gave you options.
Jesse,
You
the
just haven't taken them.
gentleman that you brought in, we got the documents from the FOIA request that clearly showed that the EPA's intention with him was not to facilitate a trusting relationship with the CAG, and we'll be happy to share that documentation with you. We don't want to go over the old history. We want to move forward with the EPA. Now we have a new president, a new administration, and we're really looking forward to establishing a new, more trusting relationship, a more working relationship with you. I don't know how much the last administration impacted what happened with us, but we're looking forward to a more trusting relationship. For example, the toxicologist that you provided came, and she was talking about science from the 1980s about, the poison is in the dose, and the higher the dose, the more the poison, the lower the dose, the safer it was. And it clearly, science has moved way beyond that. And we want to have access, we want to share what science that we have been able to find with you, and to hear from scientists at EPA. We know they're there, we hope they're there, to really address the issues in the context of science that is available to us today. So, and thank you for sticking with us.
So, so if we would like to, we can talk about it as a CAG, but could one of you in the following meetings come and kind of coach us through getting that support if we choose to? Would that be a possibility?
Yeah, this is Chris. Let me turn my camera on here real quick. I can have Ryan work with Ryan to provide a presentation. That stuff's also easily found on our website. So if you want to link to that, I'm happy to share it as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Chris. So there's that. So what would be the best way the most useful way of going through individual items on the SIP, and the most productive way? Because I know that, we could spend 2 hours on every single one of these items. And I want us to have a fruitful conversation, a fruitful relationship on this. And so what would be the best way to do that? How can you best hear our comments, and what's the best way to kind of work them into the final SIP and all of those kinds of things?
Ryan, jump in here too, but my initial thought in reading through this is just, I would submit these in writing to us. One, it creates a record, kind of a record of communication. And the other way is then we can respond and get those dialogues. And then also, I think when you do that, we'll respond in writing, but I think one of the things that Ryan will bring to the table too is being able to potentially bring a few groups together, a few CAG members together, and kind of talk through the concerns and use the current CIP, and then address whatever concerns, questions you raise and add on to that. I think would be the best form, rather than have a debate about what's wrong, what's not wrong with it. The kind of beauty of a CIP, it can be adjusted based on new community information. So, provide those comments to us in writing, and those that we can address, we will, and those we can't, we can either talk through or respond to and explain why or why not. Similar to what we've done when other CAGs have submitted comments to us as well. We've almost provided what's called like a responsiveness summary to that. It's not required, but it helped them understand, okay, well, use X, Y, and you put, I can't think of a specific example, so we'll use X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, this really doesn't involve a SIP or not part of a SIP, but we can always add that. And we can always, put an addendum to it. Here are the comments the CAG submitted. Here's the ones we addressed. Here's the ones we didn't address, and here's why. And I think that way we can kind of have a constructive dialogue along those lines and not try to have a debate or I'm not looking for a right or wrong. We're trying to find a resolution onto questions, concerns you may raised on these things and then move forward with it. And then we can adjust the CIP if needed, or use an addendum like, okay, the CAG brought up some new information. We're adding this to the current CIP that's on here, and then move forward on that. I think, to me, that seems like the most, for me, from my position, the most logical kind of point forward on this.
Okay, so if we submit email through email writing, like the points in the SIP, and then what I want to make sure that we are timely in this as well. Like, I don't want to wait around much longer, as people are kind of getting these toxins in their bodies and whatever. We kind of need to be a little bit more immediate in this. So what can we, what kind of timeline can we agree to make sure that, like, if we submit these comments to you, when can we expect answers? And also, can you assure us that you will answer, that all of the questions will be answered? So timeline and assurance.
To your second point, I can assure you all your questions will be answered. Now, whether we agree on those answers, that's one question. Secondly, the timeline is,
Chris, you're like Darth Vadering right now.
You're gambling.
Maybe try it again. No. You want to try to put it in the chat, maybe? So the first question, the assurances.
Better.
No.
Here, Chris, why don't I jump in?
Okay.
If you can, and if you, I know Chris can address that in the chat in terms of a timeline. I don't want to speak for him on a timeline, but I'll just say, just kind of in regards to the CIP, and I don't want to be dismissive of the slide before that talked about how this current CIP was put together for the site. However, I'll just say that, as a new CIC to this site, when I come aboard a site, I am pretty much doing something close to a CIP for every site. A CIP is a site-specific strategy. I think on the website, they call it the backbone of community involvement on the site. But I mean, truly, I think I would emphasize that last word, strategy, as most important. It's one strategy for community involvement on the site. And certainly when a new CIC, such as myself, comes aboard, I'm going to look at different strategies, using what I've done on other sites, what we're talking about in our national meetings on other sites to help, build a strategy that makes sense for both for me as well as the CAG and the community. So it's, I heard Angela make a comment about gardening, and then Rachel, you had said, to Angela's point, who's responsible for informing the public about gardening safety. I think that's an incredibly important thing to do on this site, and that's something that doesn't need to be in a CIP for me as a new CIC to say, okay, we've heard this in the CAG meeting. Clearly, if you look at the CIP that was put together, other people have mentioned that. We can get to work on putting a fact sheet together, disseminating a fact sheet on gardening safety that hopefully can at least, move the ball forward in terms of reaching out to community members, mollifying certain concerns, and just at least, being proactive, as Rachel, as you said, so people aren't putting toxins in their body. I think, I was reflecting on the tag and the task and the facilitator. conversation. And it sounded like I was hearing the word trust a lot. And I'll say that I have put together fact sheets on things like gardening safety or real estate with CAGs and communities, even when, all the facts about every OU1, OU2, OU3 are not completely agreed upon. That doesn't mean a community and the EPA or CDPHE or a PRP is in complete lockstep. But when you assume positive intent and at least understand that there's a baseline of facts that we can agree on, I think then we can work together on getting, important information like, for example, the gardening safety information out to the community. And so just to try to wrap this up, I just, as I start on this site, I'm going to want to be doing my own community involvement plan. It might not be in the format of the CIP that we sent last week, but I'm going to be looking for strategies, and I want to hear from the CAG. On other sites, I've met with the CAG off of the normal CAG meetings and just had one-on-one conversations, one on 8 to 10 conversations, and they've gone a long way for me to kind of see where the CAG is and what are the places that we agree on, so we can move forward specifically with community involvement on the site, not just spending our time disputing certain facts about the site during these meetings. So okay. I am certainly available for all of that.
Go down here because we're losing track of time. I'm sorry, Ryan.
Yeah. No. Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't want to ramble, but I just want to help move forward and use different ideas that might not be in the CIP-UC, and so we can kind of move forward with that.
Okay.
Hey, Adrian, I know we need to move on, but when can we get that fact sheet out? Because people are already starting to plant their gardens.
And who wants Ryan? Who wants to answer that question? Rachel or Ryan? Do you want to answer that question?
So that's a great question, Angela. I was going to ask, or in the future, we could help disseminate this information. You would have to, send us a link of if we needed to, or pick up some copies. I could definitely pick some up from the office and we could disseminate. That's why we're a resource, and we really want you all to be using us as a resource to communicate with our people. So if you have those items, and a fact sheet would be great, or I believe Chris put in there a door hanger would be great because there's no contact. We can just pop them on doors as we're walking around the neighborhood.
I think,
so can
Rachel, we have a new community outreach committee, and I think that Angela will be able to tell us a little bit about what she's doing, and then maybe coordinate that with the EPA.
Sounds like something maybe the council person could help out with.
Okay, can we move along? I'm sorry,
Sure.
people.
Thank you.
Adrian, don't get upset with me. I just want to do something really quick for Ryan, certainly thanking him for being here. That is really special. And he just sent out an email that I didn't want to publicly go back to all 56 people that he had on his email trail or list. I apologize. But what I just wanted to mention, something I have just quickly learned, is that not in the record of decision, not in any third or first, second, third review that the EPA has done, is there any history on OU2 and OU3? I'm sure that, and I've copied it, we've got that information. And so what you just sent out in an email to 56 people, remind me, please get Candy C. DeBaca fixed on that one. She's a council person now. But the EPA quarterly report does not give us, just like anything that we've done, there is no history on OU2 and 3. So when we get comments like, well, we can't move forward in OU3 because, gosh, there's no funding. There hasn't been funding for a long time. So I just wanted to make sure that when we, first of all, have the 56 people that, yes, I see you doing individuals, but other SIPs, other communities have the EPA recommending if any of the people on there would like to attend a CAG meeting, or if any of those groups have their own meetings with EPA. We've heard this before, that maybe, Ryan, that's where you want to go, is to help us also connect if EPA has a working relationship in the Vasquez Boulevard Superfund site. But I do want to see history, OU 2 and 3, because I've got the history now, and it's the most shocking thing I've ever seen.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Thank you.
Sorry
Rachel.
about that.
That's okay. We need to move to Chuck. He's going to give us a presentation on the Stantec memorandum. He is a volunteer technical advisor. He's a hydrologist, a geologist, and we're lucky to have him. Thank you, Chuck. When you're ready. Okay.
Is he there?
Chuck, are you here?
Phantom.
You see 3171, is that Chuck? Did we lose him?
He might have left.
I'm calling him. I hope he's not dead. Chuck just a second. Okay, Chuck wants to know if he's unmuted at this end. Have we muted everybody? Are we muting Chuck in the process?
See with 3171, Bridget?
Yes.
Okay, but
yes,
have we muted him? He said he came on, but nobody could hear him.
He's not muted. He needs to, he needs to unmute himself. I asked him to unmute himself. Because
I guess he's trying to come in on another thing. Technology.
Well, he
In
may
the
have.
meantime,
In
the meantime, we could read part of his report.
Yeah, I remain in awe of and grateful for the CAG's tenacity and persistence, individually and as a community advisory group. What is next is to look to the next step as the Superfund process unfolds, to be ready to do the CAG's charge, one step, one document at a time.
That's right. It. I think he might be on now.
No, he's actually gone. He's gone altogether.
He was trying to get back on.
Let's see if he'll call back in.
So why don't,
we need a teenager.
Right.
He's just on the phone, right, Bridget? That he's not, he didn't do Zoom.
He just needs to call back in. That's, I think.
Yeah. Ask him to call back.
Is that him?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
We got you, Chuck.
Oh my God.
All right. I had to shut go away and come back in entirely. I don't know what the trouble was.
We gotcha. Okay.
All right. Anyway, I don't know what you talked about while I was resolving the communication system, but I've been getting a number of questions about the Stantec report and where do we go with the Stantec report. And the simple story is there's nowhere else to go with the Stantec report. I had the opportunity to review it for the CAG and offer that feedback to the agency. The agency provided some comments back on that, to which I provided additional comments, including at the last meeting, but that's as far as that report goes, or that it's worth putting any more time into it. It's fairly clear that either the city didn't get the opportunity to respond or chose not to respond directly. The only feedback that was given to the CAG was some remarks from the agency, which basically endorsed what version 2 of that technical memorandum was. So that is what is going to be used by the city to build its work plan. And I strongly suspect that's the next opportunity where the CAG may have a chance to look at something is if a draft of the work plan is offered before the final product. Based upon the quarterly report, it was clear there will be no opportunity for a public comment period, but that doesn't preclude the agency letting its advisory committee offer some comments. But if not then, at least when the work plan is finalized, and since that's, I'm thinking, although I don't know for certain, that is a document that the agency will insist there be a final version of, as opposed to an internal communication between the city and its consultants. Those almost never end up having or at least not in the last 10 or 15 years, having a final version go to press. They leave those as drafts. So I don't know when the next opportunity to review something produced for the Superfund site is going to be made available to the advisory committee or the advisory group. But I will certainly offer my services on any such report that is pertinent to geology and hydrogeology, that sort of thing. But the Stantec is, short of there being another version of it put out to see if it changes at all, that's water under the bridge, and there isn't anything to do further with that. So absent documents produced by one of the agencies that offers an opportunity to review and comment, I'll go back to what I was doing before the technical memorandum came out, and working on what I think are the critical elements and the necessary elements and processes for a remedial investigation, so that at least I can give the advisory group an approximate document to compare against anything the the EPA produces, or the city produces, or CDPHE produces, that they're going to call a remedial investigation. But hopefully, properly, you'll have the opportunity to provide feedback on the work plan, because that is what the implementation of the work plan is what produces either a decent, valid, and functional remedial investigation, or will preclude a reasonable, technical, usable remedial investigation. So I sincerely hope, I don't know if we have anyone from the city listening in tonight or not. I know we've got some federal agency people, and Fonda, bless his heart, is here. I really hope that the advisory group has the opportunity to be involved in on the work plan level. But if not, I'll keep chewing away at what needs to be done, and make myself available at meetings to questions that people have as they come up. So anyway, if there are any questions now, I can answer them quickly, but I think you're running behind on time.
So Chuck, I have a question. May I ask Adrienne a question?
Sure.
So you mentioned a model that was done. I forget the exact technical name for it, but a model that was done that hasn't really been changed since, I guess, 1999 or thereabouts. That is supposed to be a living document. It's supposed to be changed as the project moves ahead. Can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, that was something I commented on in the review of the technical memorandum. There were some pages in that document that talked about revised conceptual models, and what I was talking about is a conceptual model. It's a mental construct of how you think the site works, what's involved in the site, how it got to be the way it is, what the basic elements of the function of the site are. And the revisions to a conceptual model were not revisions to the site model. They were just revisions with respect to details of exposure of iron and lead, either to the human receptors or to the environmental receptors. Not what I was talking about in my critique of the need for a revised site conceptual model, because that hasn't changed. The agency, none of the agencies, none of the players have gone back based upon what has been learned to say the whole set of premises we started with on this site, when we identified that there was at a minimum iron or arsenic and lead contamination in people's backyards. We established in looking into those two contaminants in that setting that our original hypothesis for the site was incorrect. The arsenic and the lead, the two contaminants that were looked at in detail, were not, as originally hypothesized, the result of airfall from dust and precipitates coming out of the stack. It was a more random placement. It did not fit the airfall model. And the appropriate thing then is, okay, we know the contamination's there, But to really assess it, to really establish that we're going to be able to solve the problem, we have to have a viable understanding, formulation, conceptual model of how that material got to the top 2 inches of people's soil. That was never done. All of the work that was done in OU1 was strictly to look at the top 2 inches of people's backyards and schools and parks, that sort of thing. But no assessment was made, even though as far back as the 1990s, trucking waste off the industrial facility, the smelter area, and using it as fill, back in the original assessment by Colorado Department of Health, that was one of the postulated ways that the neighborhood might have been impacted. But once the conceptual model went to the airfall, that has been exclusively what's been looked at. And that needs to be re-looked at. The airfall, for one thing, only accounts for 5 or 6% of the wastes produced from a smelter system. And of course, that doesn't take into account at all the other sets of waste at OU2, the wastes that were put in the dump to fill up the holes on the site. The work that was acknowledged, again, as far back as 92 or 4, whenever that preliminary assessment was that wastes from that smelter system certainly were deposited up in the national western area. This isn't a new idea. It's something that got pushed aside at the turn of the century in favor of the airfall, which doesn't work. So it's time to go back for the site as a whole and for OU2 and look at what wastes have been generated, not just the airfall wastes. Where did it go? What are the characteristics of all those different waste streams? OU2 offers a wonderful opportunity to, at the vicinity of the smelter, look at the smelter wastes. It also is a wonderful opportunity to look at pre-RCRA law municipal dumps and what's in them and what kinds of places did Denver do that same thing that it did on the Omaha Grant facility, and use the characterization of the smelter facility to look at a much broader conceptual model of what it is that has contaminated, and for the most part is probably still contaminating that neighborhood. So that's the conceptual model that and the redesign thereof that needs to take place. But that concern on my part is not yet at this point shared by EPA. They want to contract any activity, not expand it, I think. Certainly that is, I would argue, the best explanation for City and County of Denver's behavior. But that's the conceptual model I was talking about.
Chuck, may I ask you a question? This is Joan.
Yes.
Chuck, in going back to try to put pieces of what's happened here with the Vasquez Boulevard Superfund site since it was first considered a national Superfund site in 1999, I was trying to find and follow a timeline of what happened with OU2 and 3. And as I mentioned earlier, and I probably didn't articulate it very well, I don't do that. I research, but articulate something else. But my point is, that OU2 and OU3 have absolutely no reference in the record of decision, baseline health risk assessment, any of the required first year review, second or third year review. There is no mention of OU2. There is no history. When you go to the website, there also is a brief history of what we as CAG began with, which was the city of Denver doing a time critical removal action in their park and moving some of it into the OU2, which brought the CAG into the OU2. No discussion, the decision had pretty much been made on OU1. We never got presentations there, but OU2 and 3 is where we are right now. And Jesse has said, you know, we didn't move forward because there was a lot of missing information. Gaps, they call it. 10 years later, and there's still gaps. OU3, we're being told now, is just a funding issue. Well, why is that? So when we gather some of the documents that we don't see online, you can get them through links. It's amazing how somebody's out there sending us some links, or there's just links out there. I apologize for that. But so there's a lot of information that is missing. And I think that's what the community has a right to know, that how did we first begin with an OU2 and an OU3? Where are all the documents that tell us what that history is, but it never showed up in anything formal that will be introduced to the administrative record?
Okay, we have to move along. I'm sorry, everyone. Interesting conversations, but we have to move to the next section, which is the introduction of the Vasquez Boulevard I-70 CAG committee chairs. So, Angela, are you
Hi,
with?
everyone.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Angela Garcia, and I have lived in Globeville for most of my life. My family relocated to Globeville from what is now the Metro State campus. And when I grew up, I decided I wanted to stay in this neighborhood. So in December of this year, I'll have lived in my home for 29 years. I was a former CDPHE employee. I worked in the STI HIV program for 29 years. I retired 6 years ago. I have been advocating for my community while I was working, and then when I retired, I became a member of the original Washington Street redevelopment, the Globeville Stormwater Project, and another thing which escapes my brain right now. And then Adrian Pike and I were, along with 5 other people, were founding members of Globeville First, which is a registered neighborhood organization here in Globeville. And I have been a member of CAG for about a year, the same as Adrian Pike, and I really enjoy it. I've learned a lot every time I come to these meetings. I will admit that I often have to text Adrian Pike for a translation of what it is you all are saying, because your scientific knowledge is way above my brain. So I don't know how quite this happened. I was talking with Fran, Bridget, and Adrian Pike, and suggested if we could have community meetings so that we could have more community members from GES participate, and a way to make it easier for the community to understand what you all are getting across. I mean, just tonight alone, I was blown away by what you were saying, but a lot of it, I'm like, I don't know what it means. And it's not the fact that the people in GES are ignorant, and we had this conversation last month as well. It's just that we don't have the extreme knowledge that all of you do. A lot of us have more than one job. And then you have to come home, of course, take care of yourself, your family, your children, your dog, your yard, your house. And I would like to make this an easier process for people to understand on how all of this affects them. You know, on my block alone, there are 4 of us who have breathing issues. Why is that? We've all lived in Globeville the majority of our lives. Why are we all sucking on inhalers? Why are some of us on oxygen 24/7? My mom was on oxygen 24/7 when she was alive. Why is that? What are the underlying health effects that we have because we live in these neighborhoods? And we've all heard Mary Hernandez speak about what happened to her family. But what can we do? How can we fix that? How can we encourage this community to become involved, and also to give them the tools to be able to call city council, the mayor's office, the governor's office, the EPA, and ask them, why is this happening to us? We are not expendable because we're poor. We are not expendable because we're brown. We are not expendable because we're monolingual English, Spanish speaking. Why is this happening to us? We're tired of this being done. And I've seen a lot of movement in the past year of the community coming together to push back against the city and developers and asking questions. So I think that it can be done. And I look forward to working with all of you as I try to plan this out. And I will come back to all of you and ask for your ideas and your information as I move forward. For now, I'm going to throw it off to Bridget or to Adrian Pike if you guys want to add anything. Thank you.
Rachel, I think Rachel's next, isn't it? Am I right? No?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, Angela, thank you. So in my role as Healthy Communities Chair, I've been working, kind of the sort of role that I have is connecting broadly with the state and and national sort of environmental movements and what's happening in different pockets in the Democratic Party, for instance. I'll have to check if anybody knows of a Republican Party environmental initiative, then please feel free to hook me up with that and I'll hang out with those folks as well. So I go to a lot of meetings and trainings about like what these toxins do, and hopefully can bring that back to you all, and I'm happy to start doing some more like reporting out. I just kind of report out to individuals about stuff that we need to know that's happening. But happy to do that, and happy to let folks know when those meetings are too, that I'm kind of attending throughout the month. And yeah, so just, and then also I want us to make sure that our CAG is completely and absolutely community driven and community led. So those are kind of two pieces for me. And then Adrian, do you want to talk a little bit about what you do and what you're going to do?
Well, I did an introduction. So I'm interested in the sciences or the pollution, the science of the pollution, or pollution of the science for the GES and the effect it has on the community. I am very interested in the epidemiology and the pathology of conditions that are very high in high incidences in GES, and in relation to the pollution that is evident here. So with my background, I'm hoping that I can help and evaluate, but I am on a hard time getting any data for the analysis of the people. I believe it's been done over the years. I believe they have had plasma levels measured extensively, my understanding, and I just can't seem to find get access to them. So and then also the pathologies of the incidences of problems that we have, like asthma, childhood leukemia if it exists, cancer, birth defects. It'd be interesting to see if we indeed have an elevation here in GES for those types of conditions, But again, I can't seem to get access to any of that information. If anybody knows anyone that can get me in touch with somebody, I'd, be very interested in putting some data together. Maybe it'll help them out. I don't know if they're swamped with that type of information. So anyway, thank you all. And I think we have one more part of the meeting.
Absolutely. And we can go ahead and not like stop sharing and kind of have everybody's faces, because I think we're kind of finishing up. So yes, the code of conduct. I kind of already sort of addressed it in a way. I want to make sure that folks are heard, period. And I want to make sure that we get answers and ultimately I want us to make sure that we are intentional about this space being for one reason, and that's to clean up some toxins. Like, we're all on the same team, and we all should be working towards the same goal, which is to clean up the toxins, and then so our community members can breathe and drink water and garden safely. Like, that's what we're all here for. So I guess the ask is that listening happens and that people are respectful, but then also to our agency partners, if there's a way that we can communicate with you better, if there's a way that you would prefer to have questions or discussion, whatever it takes to have it so that our questions get answered in ways that we understand and that we can disseminate to the community, we really do request that you offer those suggestions up. I also just really would want folks to refrain from interrupting in the middle of somebody's speech or discussion. And also, if folks want to comment about the inaccuracy of someone else's comment, then please put that in the chat with a reference about where you're getting that from. I don't really want us to get into shouting matches on Zoom. I feel like once we start to litigate our conversations with our sub points and try to lawyer it out, then we've lost it. We've lost this discussion. So I want us to stay on this side of things and not get to a pit. Like, if you start to feel like you're getting a little too like emotionally invested or whatever, those kinds of things, let's really try to like have cooler heads here and make sure that works. And so I guess at this point, what we decided in our sort of informal rulemaking session is that we'll write questions to the EPA based on the SIP for this time. And then Chuck also had questions too. So his questions and getting those answered for the Syntax report, that would be really great as well. So I guess at this point we're writing questions down, and then I believe 30 days is what we've been told that we'll receive an answer back from. So there's that. I really want this to be fruitful, and I don't want this to be circular, and I want us to move forward and get people out gardening as soon as possible. So that's it. Are there any? Yes, Dennis.
I just want to wonder, I mean, I've been coming to all of these meetings and I have not noticed any of the concerns that you've raised. I haven't noticed people interrupting. I haven't noticed people. I did notice one time when I mentioned that we shouldn't put all of our eggs in the Democratic basket. I think that I was looked down upon a little bit. How dare I go against the deposit of faith? And when I reminded everyone that it was Obama's Secretary of Transportation that on the final day of the final hour that he was in office, let the I-70 project go forward, I felt that some took offense at that. But maybe just because I'm used to being in the legislature where everybody sort of shouts at each other, I have not noticed that we've been doing that. And I always learn a lot. And I like what you say. I hope we'll deal with each other courteously and yet on the other hand, like good friends, be able to disagree and always not do argumentum ad hominem, the argument against the person. So just want to second what you said, but again, am I attending some other CAG that I can't get used to, Bridget, that I haven't noticed that we're doing this. I do notice now and again in the writings attacks argumentum ad personam, or against the person, which is not good. And I agree with Rachel on that. So just wanted to put my second in and hope that we'll keep a sense of humor too.
I just want to say, I know I was guilted last week when there was Justice Lady was speaking, but once I was corrected, I went straight to text or to the comments. I felt strong that I wanted to make sure that her comment that she had made about one thing was brought to people's attention. And then after that, I made sure that I just kept it in the text box.
Yeah.
I appreciate all of everybody's efforts. I know that this is really can be very passionate. We're all very passionate about the earth, and we're passionate about the science that we work on. And so I think that we just have to like take that as sort of, we all care, and hopefully we can get this job done better. And so, yes, we have some agency reports in.
Right, we're back.
To finish up. Yeah,
Thank
go ahead.
you everyone for your participation with that. We have agency reports and missions, CPA mission of the EPA to protect human health and the environment. CDPHE, the mission of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is to protect and improve the health of Colorado's people and the quality of its environment. Colorado will be the healthiest state with the highest quality environment. Denver, our mission is to empower Denver's communities to live a better, longer, I would say, life. Any comments on that? Dennis?
Well, I just want to say that when I studied Middle Welsh in graduate school, that you are a Gur Bonhedig, a man of good genealogy. So thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr. I'm almost forgetting it. Okay. Suggestions for the agenda for June 15th CAG meeting. Anyone?
We'll think of something.
Okay.
Bridget,
Okay.
did you mention there's some kind of a tour tomorrow of some facility?
Yes, Angela, are you still with us?
Yes, tomorrow there is a tour of the levees. Let me see if I can find it somewhere. I think I emailed it out to everyone.
Oh, okay. I'll check it.
Yeah, it starts at, Bridget, do you know? I can't seem to find it now that I'm looking for it, of course.
It starts at 10 o'clock. We're going to go have breakfast, first of all, at your Don Juan to have enchiladas for breakfast. And then we're going to go over at 10 o'clock. Where's the meeting place, Angela? You know?
That's what I'm looking for in my notes. Oh, wait, here, this might be it. Here it is. I got it. So they are going to be meeting at Ringsby Court in the northern parking lot from 10 to 10:40. And then there'll be a walking tour of the levee, Ringsby Court to Heron Pond from 10:40 to 11:40. Wear comfortable shoes and bring water. And then there will be a wrap up at Carpo Sanguinetti Park, which I'm not looking forward to, on 50th, just west of Washington Avenue. And I've already talked to Bridget and Adrian about my concerns about Carpo Sanguinetti, but that used to be where the treatment plants used to be when I was growing up. And also Asarco used to go dump all their stuff in that whole area. So I'm always really wary when I go over there. I've already had cancer. I don't want to come back with more. I don't want to have to glow or anything. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, that is that. Yeah.
So our civil engineer, CAG advisor, Adrian Brown, is going to be on the walk. And I know he has a great interest in all that stuff. So he will be offering comments as well, probably next month.
Oh, cool.
Great.
So,
Okay. Meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, everyone. Bridget and Rachel, Angela, thank you so much for all your participation. Any questions, any comments, please forward them. I think you know how to get a hold of us now. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bonsoir.